Welcome to this new automotive news video for Friday, May 8, 2026. Today we're going to talk about the new electric Renault Twingo, the first units of which have been delivered since the beginning of 2026, and which, through no fault of its own, is under fire from critics. We'll talk about it in detail, but the first customers are far from being fully satisfied with their Twingo. We'll then talk about Citroën, which is lowering the prices of its new C5 Aircross, and Renault, a Chinese brand you might not know yet, but which has just unveiled a sedan capable of more than 2,000 kilometers of range, sold for less than 12,000 euros. We'll talk about Renault for another news item since the Diamond Badge automaker is forced to stop production of several of its models in its factories in Spain. Lastly, we'll discuss Stellantis, which is about to resell a European factory to a Chinese brand as part of a new partnership. A partnership that, as you will see, goes far beyond just selling factories. I hope today's topics will interest you, and if that's the case, I'm counting on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for upcoming videos, boosting this one if the option appears for you, and leaving a comment where you share your thoughts on today's news and your own experiences. If you also own a Renault Twingo Electric and want to share your experience with us in the comments, whether you're satisfied or not, feel free to do so. Before that, I'm adding some extra news since we'll discuss the Stellantis group in this video. Remember a few days ago we talked about the fact that Stellantis had decided for its future models to replace the 1L PureTech with the Firefly 1.5L and 1.3L engines that are mainly found under the hoods of Italian brands like Alfa Romeo and Fiat. We learned this morning that the 1L PureTech engine, which is now called the 1L Turbo, will finally be approved for Euro 7 standards, so it can continue to be sold on the models where it is already used. In other words, even though in the long term, Peugeot, Citroën, and other French brands of the Stellantis group will be equipped with Firefly engines, this won't change right away. The current models that have the PureTech will keep it at least until the end of 2027. To start this video, we're going to talk about the electric Twingo, whose first units have been delivered for a few weeks now. And since its first deliveries, you can read user feedback from the first customers on various automotive forums. Obviously, of course, there are some who are very satisfied, some who really appreciate the car's design, its compact size, and its practicality. But for several weeks now, you can also read feedback similar to what was said about the entry-level Renault 5. Until now, I hadn't taken this feedback seriously or wanted to discuss it in a video, since negative feedback on new products tends to stand out more than positive. Except that since the beginning of the week of May 4th, 2026, the press embargo on tests conducted on the Renault 5 Electric has been lifted. Recently, the press has been officially allowed to share their opinions on the Renault Twingo Electric. And while reading these different reviews, I found exactly the same problems that were mentioned by the first customers of the Twingo Electric. The problem is that the real range of this car and its charging times make it absolutely impossible to use the Renault Twingo Electric as an all-around car. This represents a double problem because the first issue, which we'll obviously talk about in this video, is really about using the vehicle. But the second problem is the information surrounding the Twingo Electric. That's where it reminds me a bit of what people were saying about the Renault 5 Electric when it came out. In dealerships, according to what you can read on various forums, the salespeople always highlight the theoretical range of 163 kilometers, and they forget to mention that in practice, it's almost impossible to use it. But above all, they never mention the real range on expressways or highways, which is obviously, and we'll talk about it, much lower than the claimed 263 kilometers. And they also don't point out the fact that on this Renault Twingo Electric, the battery charging curve almost never reaches the maximum fast charging power, which Renault sets at around 50 kilodollars. In fact, you get about 50 kilodollars around 20 to 30% charge, but then the fast charging power gradually drops until it only reaches 25 kilodollars around 80%, which means that in reality, to fully charge the battery of the Twingo Electric, it actually takes 25 minutes to go from 20 to 80%, but for the last 20% to go from 80 to 100% charge. It takes an additional 30 minutes. So in reality, it takes more than an hour to fully charge the battery of this Twingo Electric to 100%, which is more time than it takes to discharge it completely while driving on the highway. Indeed, that's one of the drawbacks of these small electric cars in terms of versatility. It's that, indeed, if you do a full cycle, discharging, so really from 100% to 0% of the battery, you can do about 130 kilometers on the highway at 130 kilometers per hour, so that's about half of the 260 kilometers announced by Renault. So a battery that will be depleted in about an hour and will require a little more than an hour to be recharged. Either you really want to take advantage of an optimized charging curve, and in that case, you only drive between 80% and 20%. And in that case, with this usable charge, the real range on the highway is around 95 kilometers. And that's something customers may not know before buying. Customers may not know this before buying, so it's considered their fault, so to speak. If people spend 18,000 to 21,000 euros on a Twingo electric without researching, that's their issue. But there's also a problem with the available information. When you talk to a salesperson at a dealership about an electric car, they never mention the real range on the highway or talk to you about the charging curve, for the simple reason that it's much less appealing to talk about a car that has a 90-kilometer range for 18,000 euros and needs an hour to charge from 0 to 100%. We always complain that the European Commission has too many regulations when it comes to cars in Europe. But it's true that it would still be interesting for customers that the European Union should require manufacturers to display, in dealerships and for each model in a visible way, the highway range at the speed limit in the country in question, as well as the charging curves. And since we're talking about range, on one end of the spectrum, we have the Twingo Electric, which really has a very small range, and on the other end, we now have the Renault M7 DMH. It's a Chinese brand that's launching this model, capable of going 2,050 km on a single tank and a single charge. So, indeed, here we're talking about a plug-in hybrid vehicle that, according to the brand, can go up to 160 kilometers in full electric mode with a 19.7 kWh battery, combined with an electric motor that produces 184 horsepower. And on the other side, the internal combustion side, a 4-cylinder gasoline engine, or in the hybrid version, a 5-cylinder that produces 110 horsepower, and with the electric part plus the gasoline part. That's 2,050 kilometers according to the CLTC cycle. We know that the CLTC is still very optimistic. It's probably closer to around 1,500 kilometers if it were suddenly rated under WLTP, the European protocol. And that's pretty huge, especially when you know that this car is offered in China starting at 11,700 euros. So, what can you get in Europe for 11,700 euros? Well, let me tell you, absolutely nothing. We'll see, because all the manufacturers are currently lowering the prices of their cars to try to compete a bit with the Chinese competition. The latest one is Citroën, which is offering new discounts on its Citroën C5 Aircross. More specifically, on its electric version, because in addition to the CEE purchase bonus, Citroën is offering its own discount.
Il peut atteindre 4 000 euros supplémentaires.
On the condition that you agree to scrap a vehicle that's more than 8 years old. It's a kind of homemade scrappage bonus from Citroën. Between the bonus and this additional 4,000 euro incentive, the entry-level price of the 100% electric version drops from 40,000 to 32,690 euros. And at that price, you get the version that, on paper, can do 520 kilometers according to the WLTP protocol and is compatible with 160 km fast charging. Since we're discussing Stellantis, an agreement has finally been reached between Stellantis and the Chinese brand Leapmotor. This agreement covers several areas. First, a partial or total sale, we don't really know yet, of the Villaverde factory, which is the Stellantis group factory that currently produces the Citroën C4. Citroën C4, whose production will soon be stopped at this factory. And rather than assigning it the production of a new Stellantis group model, the idea here would be to start producing a Leapmotor model there. At the same time, it was confirmed that the Opel brand, which now belongs to the Stellantis group, will have, let's say, a broader partnership with the Leapmotor brand, since Leapmotor and Opel will, and this has now been officially confirmed, work together on the co-development of a new C-segment SUV, so a medium-sized SUV, let's say, which will be marketed in Europe under the Opel name, but will be based on Chinese technology. Leapmotor technology. So Leapmotor will provide the platform, the electric motor, the batteries, and the software that manages the whole system. So really the heart of the car, and Opel will handle the aesthetics, bodywork, and interior. Thanks to this collaboration, this new SUV should be developed in less than 2 years, compared to the 3 to 4 years usually needed in the European automotive industry to develop a new model. And it should be produced in the Spanish factory in Zaragoza, where the Leapmotor B10 is already being made. So it's both a strategic decision, but above all, a symbolic one. Because we can't really say that Opel is a particularly important brand within the Stellantis group. It's really a niche brand compared to Fiat or Peugeot. But there you have it. It's symbolic, it's official. Chinese car companies are gradually buying up European automotive infrastructures and slowly starting to chip away at the European automotive industrial network. Since we're discussing Spain, we've just learned something amazing. Remember, a few months ago, we were talking about how Renault was trying to move part of its electric vehicle production from France to Spain, especially everything related to the Scenic and other large electric SUVs. That was a decision made because Renault's main goal now is to reduce costs. And indeed, producing vehicles in Spain is cheaper than in France. Except that they simply couldn't reach an agreement with the local workers' unions. Renault had been working on different agreements for months, but still no solution was found. So, Renault simply canceled its production plans in Spain. Renault explained that the latest agreements under review were basically the union's last chance to reach a deal. But no agreement was reached. The 3 electric vehicles planned for production there will ultimately not be made there. It's a bit of a blow for Spain. Even though right now, in any case, Spain is attracting so many manufacturers for car production that it won't make much difference for them. On the other hand, for Renault, we can wonder a little about what this means. Because where will they have these 3 vehicles made? There's little chance it will be in France, precisely because of this cost-cutting policy. Will Renault turn to Turkey, Morocco, or Slovakia? Well, we'll see. In any case, it's quite a setback, isn't it? That's it, we've covered today's news. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, as usual, please show your support by leaving a like, subscribing, and becoming a supporting member by clicking the join button below this video. See you tomorrow for the next video. Bye!